My name's Jacob, I'm 24, and if there's one thing I've always been proud of, it's that I never leaned on anyone else to build my life. I started working when I was 16, 2 jobs at once, in fact. During the day, I stocked shelves at a local grocery store, and at night, I flipped burgers at a fast food joint until closing. I'd come home smelling like fryer oil, hands sore from lifting boxes, but even then I knew I wasn't going to waste those hours. Every paycheck went straight into savings, with just enough skimmed off to cover gas, books, and the occasional cheap pizza with friends. By the time college rolled around, I didn't have the luxury of choice. I either figured it out on my own, or I didn't go at all. While most of my classmates could fall back on their parents for tuition or rent, I was up at dawn working shifts before class and clocking in again as soon as lectures ended. It wasn't glamorous, and plenty of nights I questioned whether I'd make it through, but I did. No debt, no handouts, just stubbornness and a spreadsheet of expenses so tight that I sometimes joked my budget was held together with duct tape. And after years of grinding, I finally reached a milestone I had been dreaming of since I was a kid, buying my own car. Not just a beater to get from point A to point B, but my dream car. I'd been staring at it on posters in my room back in high school, watching reviews online late at night when I should have been studying. It wasn't some ultra-luxury vehicle, but to me, it was everything. Sleek, powerful, reliable, and, most importantly, mine. No cosigner, no parent's name on the paperwork, just me. I remember the day I picked it up. The salesman handed me the keys, and I sat there in the driver's seat for a moment, just staring at the steering wheel. For the first time, I felt like I had tangible proof of all those years of sacrifice. When I pulled into my parents' driveway to show them, I expected maybe a little bit of pride. Congratulations, or even a nice car. What I got instead was different. My mom's first words weren't, "That's great, Jacob," but, "Oh, you should let your sister drive this. She needs a car way more than you." My dad nodded in agreement, like it was the most natural suggestion in the world. My sister, who was lounging on the porch scrolling through her phone, looked up with this smirk that made my stomach twist. "Yeah," she said casually, "I could use something reliable. My car's been giving me issues." The thing is, my sister never had to work a day in her life if she didn't want to. My parents always covered her expenses, from her college tuition to her rent. When her old car broke down, they gave her one of theirs. She'd crashed it twice already, once because she was texting, the other because she thought red lights were more like guidelines. But here they were, looking at me, the son who'd done everything himself, and acting like it was my responsibility to just hand over the keys to the one thing I had worked toward for nearly a decade. I laughed at first, thinking it was some kind of joke. "No way," I said. "This is my car. I've been saving for years for this." My mom's face hardened immediately. "Don't be selfish, Jacob. Your sister needs it. You're young and single. You don't need something so extravagant." My dad chimed in. "She has responsibilities. You can always buy another one later." It was like a switch flipped inside me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd busted my back for this car, for this moment, and they were trying to guilt me into giving it up because my sister, who'd never lifted a finger to earn anything, wanted it. I could feel my jaw clench, my pulse picking up. My sister didn't even bother hiding her grin. "I mean, you don't want to be the selfish brother, right?" she said, twirling her hair like this was already a done deal. I didn't argue right then. I just smiled tightly, said I was tired, and drove home. But that night, lying awake in bed, my thoughts kept circling. I realized this wasn't just about the car. It was about every holiday where my sister's gifts were bigger, every argument where my parents took her side without listening to me, every time my achievements were brushed aside while hers were celebrated. The car was just the latest and most blatant example of how little they respected the work I put into my life. That was the first time I felt the real weight of it. The years of being dismissed, overlooked, and treated like I was less deserving. And it was also the first time I started thinking, maybe it was time I stopped playing along with their version of family. And then, just a few days later, they pushed it even further. The next few days after I brought the car home were tense in a way I couldn't quite explain. Every phone call from my parents felt like it came with an agenda, and every text from my sister had this smug undertone, like she already believed the car was hers. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself I was just overthinking it. But then small things started happening that confirmed what I had feared. They weren't going to drop this. It started with my mom. She called me one morning while I was on my way to work. "Jacob," she said in that overly sweet tone she used whenever she wanted something. "Your sister's car finally gave out. It won't even start. She's really struggling, and you know how important it is for her to have reliable transportation." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Okay, but that doesn't mean I'm giving her mine, Mom. I worked too hard for this." Her voice sharpened instantly. "You're being unreasonable. She has a job, Jacob. She can't just miss shifts because you're being stubborn. Families support each other. Isn't that what we always taught you?" I almost laughed at that. Support each other? I had supported myself since I was 16. My sister had never once paid her own way. Still, I bit my tongue and told her I'd help look into cheap used cars for my sister. My mom sighed, disappointed, and said, "We'll see," before hanging up. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house for a family dinner. The moment I pulled up in my car, I saw my sister standing in the driveway, arms crossed, looking me up and down like she was already inspecting her new possession. "You really should let me take it for a spin," she said as I got out. "I need to get used to it before it's officially mine." I stared at her, stunned. "What are you talking about?" She shrugged casually, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "Mom and Dad said you'd hand it over. They even told me I could start moving my stuff into the garage spot since you don't need it." Inside, the tension got worse. At the dinner table, my parents acted like referees in a game I didn't even agree to play. My dad looked at me sternly. "Your sister's car is gone. She can't afford to buy something decent right now, and you're in a position to help. It's only fair, Jacob. You don't have kids to worry about. You don't have a mortgage yet. You can always buy another car down the line. Think of this as doing your part for the family." I set down my fork slowly. I'm not giving up my car. I saved for this for 8 years. Why is it always me who has to sacrifice? My mom pursed her lips, her eyes flashing. "Because you're the strong one. You can handle it. She's delicate." I nearly choked on my drink. Delicate? My sister was 22 years old, fully capable of working, and had been bailed out of every mess she'd ever created. The word delicate was just another excuse to keep enabling her. Dinner ended with my sister sulking and my parents glaring at me like I had just committed some crime against the family. As I left, my dad muttered under his breath, "You're making things harder than they need to be." That line stuck with me. It wasn't about fairness or logic. It was about control. They expected me to roll over and do what they wanted, the same way I always had when I was younger. A few days later, the situation escalated even further. I got a call from my sister while I was at work. She didn't even bother with small talk. "Hey, where are your spare keys?" she asked casually. I froze. "What do you mean? Where are my spare keys?" "Well," she said, dragging the word out like it was obvious. "Dad told me you'd come around eventually, so I figured I'd save you the trouble. I need to start using the car this week. So just tell me where they are. I'll swing by and grab them." My jaw dropped. "Are you out of your mind? You're not touching my car. Do not show up at my place looking for keys." She huffed like a child being told no. "Wow, Jacob, you're seriously going to play this game? Mom and Dad said you'd do the right thing. I don't know why you're dragging it out. Honestly, it's embarrassing." I hung up on her, but I couldn't shake the unease. It was becoming clear that they weren't just trying to persuade me anymore. They were actively planning around me, like my refusal didn't even matter. The following weekend, I stopped by my parents' house again, and this time I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the kitchen counter sat a shiny new insurance card with my car's make and model on it, but my sister's name listed as the driver. I held it up, my voice trembling. "What is this?" My mom barely glanced up. "Language, Jacob. We're just being practical. Once you see reason, everything will already be set up. No point dragging this out." That was the moment it hit me like a brick. They weren't waiting for me to agree. They were moving forward as if my decision didn't matter at all. And that was the moment I realized things were about to get a lot uglier. I didn't sleep much after finding that insurance card. My mind kept replaying the scene in the kitchen, my mom's casual dismissal, my dad's silence, my sister's smug assumption that everything was already hers. It wasn't just about entitlement anymore. It was about erasing my choice, my voice, my rights over something I had worked my entire young adult life to achieve. I decided to keep my distance for a while, but distance didn't mean peace. A week later, I came home from work late one night and noticed something strange. My car, usually parked neatly in the spot I always left it, was crooked, not just slightly, angled across the lines like someone had rushed it back into place. My chest tightened as I walked closer. I immediately spotted faint scratches along the side panel, ones that definitely hadn't been there the day before. I pulled out my phone light and scanned the car. The scratches weren't catastrophic, but they were noticeable, long scuffs across the paint. And then I saw it. The seat inside was adjusted all the way forward. I never drove with it like that. Someone had been in my car. My heart was pounding as I checked my apartment. The spare key, which I always kept in the drawer by my bed, was gone. I didn't even need to guess who it was. My sister must have taken it. And if she had the spare, it meant one of two things. Either my parents had given it to her, or she had gone into my place and taken it herself. Both options made me feel sick. I called my mom immediately. "Where's my spare key?" I demanded. She hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already knew. "Oh, Jacob, don't get so worked up. Your sister just needed to borrow the car for a bit. It's not a big deal." I nearly dropped the phone. "Not a big deal. You let her steal my car." "Don't be dramatic," she said with a sigh. "You weren't using it at the time, and she had somewhere important to be. Honestly, I don't know why you're making this into such a crisis." Families share. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her families don't take without asking. Families don't scratch up what doesn't belong to them. Families don't dismiss the years of blood and sweat that went into a dream. But all I could do was stand there, shaking, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I asked my dad about it later, his response was even worse. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look ashamed. He just said, "You need to stop being selfish, Jacob. Your sister has responsibilities. You're just one person you can manage without for a while. This is about balance." Balance. That word cut deeper than I expected. Where was the balance when I was 16, dragging myself through 2 jobs while my sister went out with friends? Where was the balance when I had to scrape together rent while they paid hers in full? Where was the balance when my achievements were shrugged off, but my sister's every small victory was paraded around like she had climbed Everest? The final straw came a few days later. I went out to my car on a Saturday morning, planning to take it for a long drive, something I often did just to clear my head. But when I opened the door, I froze. There was a pink travel mug sitting in the cup holder, half empty, lipstick stains on the rim. My sister didn't even try to hide it this time. She was using my car like it was hers. I stormed into my parents' house that afternoon, clutching the mug in my hand like evidence at a trial. My sister was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and when she saw me, she smirked. "Oh, don't look so serious. I just needed it for errands. Relax." I threw the mug down on the table in front of her. "You scratched my car. You took my key. You're acting like it's yours when it's not." My mom rushed into the room, eyes flashing. "Jacob, lower your voice. You're scaring her." "She's not scared. She's smug because you're letting her walk all over me." I snapped back, and that's when my sister, without missing a beat, leaned back and said, "Honestly, Jacob, maybe if you weren't so obsessed with controlling everything, you'd be willing to help out once in a while. It's just a car. You'll get another one. This one is better off with me. Better off with her." I stood there, stunned into silence, as my mom nodded in agreement and my dad looked at me like I was the problem. Something inside me shifted in that moment. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. The betrayal wasn't just that they had taken my car behind my back, or that they dismissed the damage like it was nothing. The betrayal was that my parents, my own family, had chosen to side against me again and again until there was nothing left to give. I walked out of that house with my hands trembling, my stomach in knots, and a cold determination forming in the back of my mind. If this was the game they wanted to play, then fine. But I wasn't going to keep letting them write the rules. Because the truth was, they hadn't just taken my car. They'd crossed a line I could never uncross. After that day, something inside me cracked. I didn't yell, I didn't argue anymore. I just shut down. It was like all the energy I had spent defending myself drained out of me in one instant. And what was left was this hollow ache that followed me around everywhere. For the next week, I avoided my parents' house entirely. But even at home, the reminders were everywhere. My car didn't feel like mine anymore. Every time I slid into the driver's seat, I smelled that cheap perfume my sister wore, faint but lingering. The scratches on the side mocked me, catching the light every time I walked past. I started double-checking the locks on my apartment door, paranoid they'd find another way in to grab the spare key. I'd drive to work and wonder if I'd find it missing in the parking lot by the time my shift ended. That thought made me nauseous Because it wasn't just paranoia, it was a possibility. They had already shown me they didn't care about my consent. They had already crossed that line. At work, I was distracted. My boss even pulled me aside one afternoon, asking if everything was okay. I lied and said I was just tired, but the truth was, my family drama had sunk its claws into every part of my life. I couldn't focus. I couldn't sleep. Nights were the worst, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment where I should have stood up for myself harder, louder, sooner. But it was always the same realization. No matter what I said, they didn't respect me. And yet, even in that fog of exhaustion and hurt, part of me started calculating. The thing about being on the receiving end of betrayal is that it forces you to reevaluate everything. I thought back to high school, to all the times I took on extra shifts so my sister could have weekends free. I thought about the birthdays where I got a practical gift while she was showered with whatever she asked for. I thought about college, scraping together tuition payments while she got checks written to her without question. The pattern was obvious now, so painfully obvious that I felt foolish for not recognizing it sooner. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was years of conditioning me to accept less, to take the scraps while she feasted. So I withdrew. I stopped answering their calls right away, let texts sit unread, and when I did respond, it was short and clipped. My parents accused me of being cold and ungrateful, but I just didn't have the energy to argue anymore. My sister, meanwhile, flaunted her new arrangement. She'd post pictures on social media with captions like "errands in my ride," or "so glad I have a reliable car now." Seeing her grin behind the wheel of what I had bled for made my chest burn. But instead of exploding, I started thinking. Quietly, carefully. I pulled out a notebook one night and began listing options. Sell the car? Lock it down with better security? Report the scratches and damage to my insurance? Every path had complications, especially with my family involved. But writing it out made me feel like I wasn't powerless anymore. At my lowest point, I sat in the car late at night, hands gripping the steering wheel, whispering to myself, "You earned this. Don't let them take it away." My reflection in the rearview mirror looked tired, almost unrecognizable, but there was a flicker of something else there too, a spark of resolve. I realized then that walking away might not mean literally abandoning the car or my family. It might mean walking away from being the person they expected me to be, the compliant, self-sacrificing son, the one who gave until there was nothing left. It hurt. God, it hurt to accept that my own parents saw me as a resource instead of a son, that my sister viewed me not as a brother, but as an ATM with wheels attached. But pain has a way of sharpening you, if you let it. And slowly, out of that low point, I started sketching out the shape of something else. Not revenge, not yet, but the beginnings of a plan. Because if they thought I was just going to crumble and hand over the keys, they had no idea who I was anymore. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life, but strangely, also the most clarifying. Hitting rock bottom stripped away the illusions I'd carried for years, that maybe one day my parents would treat me fairly, or that my sister would grow out of her entitlement. Once I let go of that hope, I could finally focus on something I had always been good at, building. I threw myself into work with a focus I hadn't felt in months. My manager noticed right away. Instead of dragging myself through shifts, I started volunteering for projects, staying late not out of desperation, but because I wanted to prove myself. Within 2 months, I was promoted. The extra pay was nice, but the bigger reward was the feeling that I was carving out something solid, something that couldn't be taken away with guilt trips and manipulation. Outside of work, I picked up freelance gigs, small at first, then bigger. I had taught myself coding during college, mostly as a side hobby, but now I leaned into it, taking contracts in web design and back-end troubleshooting. Nights that I used to spend staring at the ceiling were now filled with projects that challenged me. The money started piling up faster than I expected. For the first time, my bank account had a cushion, not just enough to survive, but enough to breathe. And the car, my car, was still mine. After the betrayal with the spare key, I changed the locks at my apartment, installed a small safe, and had the dealership reprogram a brand new set of keys. I didn't tell anyone. My sister ranted about how unfair it was that she suddenly couldn't find the spare anymore, but I ignored her calls. For once, I didn't justify myself. Meanwhile, my social circle grew. I reconnected with college friends who had moved into the city, People who didn't know me as the kid who always gave in to his family, but as Jacob, the guy who worked hard, cracked jokes at the bar, and actually seemed happy. It was subtle, but I could feel it. My identity shifting away from being defined by my family's expectations and more by the life I was actually creating. One weekend, I took the car on a road trip with a couple of friends. We drove up into the mountains, blasting music, winding through roads that made me remember why I had dreamed of this car in the first place. Sitting at the overlook, watching the sunset reflect off the hood, I thought to myself, this is what freedom feels like. Not the absence of family, but the presence of choice. My choice. When I posted a photo from that trip, captioned simply, "Earned, not given," my phone buzzed relentlessly. Old classmates congratulated me. Coworkers joked about wanting a ride. And then, buried in the notifications, were texts from my mom. "Jacob, this is cruel. Stop rubbing it in your sister's face. Your father and I are very disappointed in you. You've changed, and not for the better." But here's the thing. For the first time, their disappointment didn't crush me. It didn't even sting. Instead, it lit something inside me. Because yes, I had changed, and I wasn't going back. I started investing too. Small at first, index funds, a modest retirement account, but then more aggressively, thanks to the extra income from freelance work. I watched as the numbers grew, slow but steady, proof that my future wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. My sister, on the other hand, was spiraling. Word got around that she had lost yet another job. She hopped between gigs, always with a story about how her boss was unfair or her coworkers didn't understand her. My parents picked up the slack, of course, covering her rent, paying her bills, excusing her failures. But I noticed something. They were starting to strain under the weight. Their sighs were heavier, their fights more frequent. And through it all, they still looked at me like I was the selfish one. But the higher I climbed, the less their judgment mattered. I was no longer the kid trying to prove himself at their dinner table. I was the man who had built his own life, piece by piece, without their help. And with every new success, my confidence grew, not just in myself, but in the knowledge that I had leverage now. Because deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before they came asking for more. And when they did, I wouldn't be the same Jacob they thought they could push around. It didn't take long for my parents to test me again. They had grown used to a version of me who would bend under pressure, so when they realized I wasn't folding this time, they shifted their tactics. Instead of outright demands, they tried manipulation, guilt trips masked as family concern, subtle digs about how I was drifting away, pointed reminders that family comes first. But here's the thing, I had changed. And with every guilt-laced message, I only felt more certain that I needed to protect what I had built. The turning point came one Sunday afternoon. I got a call from a family friend, Mr. Lewis, a neighbor who had known me since I was a kid. His voice was cautious. "Jacob, I think you should know. I overheard your parents talking about you at the store. They were saying how ungrateful you've become and how it might be time for them to take control before you ruin everything you've earned." My stomach dropped. "Take control? What do you mean?" He hesitated. "From what I gathered, they're thinking about legal angles. Something about family rights and how you owe your sister support. They said you're too stubborn to see reason, but they'll make you." I hung up the phone and sat there, stunned. It sounded absurd, parents suing their own son. But then again, hadn't they already justified taking my car without permission? Hadn't they already dismissed my boundaries like they didn't exist? To them, nothing was too far if it meant keeping my sister comfortable. That night, I stayed up late researching. I dug into property rights, insurance claims, and even scenarios where families tried to force financial support. What I found reassured me. Legally, my car and my assets were mine alone. They had no grounds. But the fact that they were even considering something like this lit a fire in me. It wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about control. So I started preparing quietly. I met with a financial advisor, someone recommended by a coworker who knew I was starting to accumulate savings. We set up accounts in my name only, with added security steps to prevent unauthorized access. I learned about trusts, titles, and asset protection. For the first time, I wasn't just saving money, I was safeguarding it. At the same time, my career was picking up. Another promotion put me in a supervisory role, and suddenly I wasn't just earning more, I had influence. I had a team reporting to me, people who respected me for my work, not for how much I sacrificed at home. That power shifted something in me. For years, I had felt small under my parents' roof. Now, I wasn't small anymore. And then came the piece of information that tied everything together. At a casual work event, I overheard one of my colleagues talking about repossession policies and insurance fraud. He had a relative go through a messy case where someone tried to claim a car that wasn't theirs. The fraud was discovered instantly because of VIN tracking and ownership records. A thought sparked in my head. If my sister or parents ever tried to pull something like that, I could catch them in the act. Every document tied to my car, title, insurance, financing, was locked in my safe. I even ordered certified copies, just in case. It was like setting a chessboard. Each piece I put in place gave me a sense of control I'd never had before. My parents and sister still saw me as the same kid they could guilt and pressure, but in reality, I was sitting on a foundation they couldn't touch. I kept my distance but stayed polite, almost neutral. When my parents complained about money, I listened without offering. When my sister ranted about her latest failed job, I nodded without reacting. Outwardly, I was calm. Inwardly, I was tightening every screw on the life I had built, making it airtight. And then, one evening, my sister slipped up. She came over unannounced, pounding on my apartment door. When I finally opened it, she stood there with her arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with that same entitled confidence I'd seen 100 times before. "You know, Jacob," she said smugly, "it's only a matter of time before Mom and Dad get this car situation sorted for me. You can keep playing stubborn, but in the end, I always get what I want." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. Because she was right about one thing, it was only a matter of time. But what she didn't know was that when the moment came, I'd already have every move prepared. The moment of truth came sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday morning, and I was halfway through reviewing a project at work when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Mr. Jacob?" the voice on the other end asked, formal and clipped. "This is Officer Reynolds with the local police department. We're calling regarding a report of a stolen vehicle registered in your name." My stomach tightened. "Stolen? What vehicle?" "Your car," he said. "It's currently in the possession of your sister, who claims it was gifted to her. We need you to come down and provide documentation." For a moment, I was silent, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. This was it, the move they had been building toward. I could almost see my parents behind it, whispering in her ear, telling her she had a right to what was mine. But instead of panic, a strange calm washed over me. They had overplayed their hand. "Yes, officer," I said steadily. "I'll bring everything you need." That evening, I walked into the station carrying a folder so thick it could have been a college thesis. Title: registration, insurance papers, certified copies. Even the loan paperwork showing every payment had come directly from my account. The officer raised his brows as he flipped through. "Well," he said, "this makes it pretty clear. Your sister doesn't have a leg to stand on." When I asked what would happen next, he explained they'd be contacting her about filing a false report. That could carry real consequences. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. My sister's car, well, technically my car, was parked out front, tilted at an odd angle like she had rushed home. I pulled into the driveway and walked in without knocking. The living room was tense, everyone waiting. My mom started first, her tone sharp. "Jacob, this is ridiculous. You embarrassed your sister with that police stunt. We told them it was just a misunderstanding." I held up the folder. "A misunderstanding?" "She reported my car as stolen. That's a crime." My sister rolled her eyes. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom and Dad said you'd come around, but you're dragging everyone through drama. Honestly, Jacob, why can't you just do the right thing for once?" That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Calmly, I set the folder on the table, opened it, and spread the documents like cards in a game of poker. This is the title. My name. This is the insurance. My name. Every payment, mine. I've got certified copies in a safe deposit box. You want to keep playing this game? Go ahead. But every move you make only digs you in deeper. For the first time, my dad looked rattled. "Jacob, you don't have to be so harsh." "No," I cut him off. "I do. Because this isn't just about a car. It's about years of being treated like I don't matter. Like my hard work is less important than her comfort. You want to call me selfish? Fine, but I will not let you steal from me. The silence that followed was thick. My mom's face was pale, my dad stared at the documents like they might rewrite themselves, and my sister's smug expression had finally cracked. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I picked up the keys from the coffee table. They must have taken them from my jacket at some point and pocketed them. Then I walked to the door. This ends now, I said quietly. Don't test me again. When I drove away, my hands were steady on the wheel. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to their manipulation. I had turned the tables. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of the fallout. The fallout came faster than even I expected. 2 days after the confrontation, my sister called me in a panic. Her voice was shaking. Jacob, they said I could get charged. Mom said you'd fix it. You have to fix it. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of her words sinking in. She wasn't worried about me, about the trust she had shattered, about the car she'd tried to steal. She was worried about herself, about facing real consequences for the first time in her life. I'm not fixing anything, I said calmly. You made your choices. Now you live with them. She started crying, loud and messy, the kind of crying she had used all her life to get our parents to swoop in and shield her. But I didn't budge. If you thought you could lie, steal, and drag me into legal trouble without fallout, you were wrong, I told her before hanging up. That evening, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. My dad's jaw was tight, my mom's eyes puffy from crying. Jacob, my mom started, you can't let this happen. She's your sister. Family doesn't do this to each other. I looked at them both and felt a strange sense of clarity. Exactly, I said. Family doesn't do this to each other. But you did. She did. And now you want me to erase it like it never happened. They both tried talking over each other. Excuses, justifications, desperate pleas, but I didn't waver. I showed them the door and told them plainly. You raised her to believe she could take whatever she wanted. Now she's learning that's not true. If you want to protect her from consequences, that's on you. But I'm done sacrificing myself for her mistakes. The days that followed were strangely quiet. My parents stopped calling as much. My sister went silent online, her endless selfies behind the wheel replaced by a void. Through a mutual friend, I heard she had taken a deal, community service and probation for filing a false report. It wasn't jail, but it was enough to leave a mark on her record. Enough to remind her she wasn't untouchable. As for me, my life kept moving forward. I kept working, kept saving, kept building. I even traded up eventually, buying a new car, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And this time, when I slid behind the wheel, I didn't feel fear that someone might take it from me. I felt peace. Months later, I drove past my parents' house. My sister's beat-up old car was back in the driveway, patched together with duct tape and denial. My parents sat on the porch, tired and distant, looking smaller than I remembered. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Because the truth was, I had already stopped playing their game. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left behind. I was free.